Hello, college football fans. Welcome to episode 226 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined as always by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, Husker fans and college football fans.
Hello, everybody. We're coming to you here again on June 14th as we transition from our national discussion from last podcast into a Husker-specific discussion of what's been going on here recently. We'll be getting into some good recruiting news on the football front and updates on some of the other sports like volleyball, baseball, and softball for something a little bit different for us. And finally, a little bit of commentary on our general manager, Pat Stewart, as well. So, a few things to get to today.
Yep. Well, there's definitely a lot going on. It's been I would say a very good, but not a great year because we are missing the crown achievements. We're missing the national championships in various sports, but collectively the athletic department at the university was highly competitive in most of its sports and had some historic years for some of the sports. So that's always a cool thing to see that kind of trend.
Yes. I know we talked about that on previous podcasts, kind of praising Troy Dannon for that, and it's continued so far into this year. So we'll hope the trend continues.
Yes.
But to properly kick things off, since we are a father-son duo here to talk about college football by college football fans for college football fans, we got a circular tradition to open up a cold beverage here. I got myself one more Golden Road Mango Cart.
Okay, I'm shifting it up now. I'm going to be drinking a Busch Light, just because I don't have a lot of the favorites that I talk about my kilt lifter. So this is a low budget beverage for me tonight.
All right. Well, you've already had one kilt lifter tonight, so probably good to do something light.
There you go. Cheers, son.
Cheers. Yeah, I know you and Emma started up a new weight loss competition here recently as well.
Yes. I need it so desperately bad.
After
we'll
all
see how I do.
Those Europe cruises and everything.
Exactly.
All right. We want to start off with a little tribute because there was some news that broke just before we started recording the podcast today, which is that George Darlington, who is a former assistant coordinator or assistant coach rather for Nebraska, passed away today. He is actually the longest serving assistant coach in the history of Nebraska football, was there for the entirety of Tom Osborne's duration, and even a little beyond, from 1973 to 2002, coaching both defensive ends and defensive backs.
Yes. And the lineage of all conference, all American NFL players that he coached is longer than my arm. I mean, it's really quite impressive. The number of players that he coached to, those kinds of accolades over the period of time that he coached. And 30 years of coaching at Nebraska. And interestingly, when he left Nebraska, he left when the transition happened with Coach Solich, who well because of your ties to Ohio. But George continued to coach at some other colleges, so he still didn't retire even after that 30 years in Nebraska. He continued to coach for a few more years, but eventually moved back to Lincoln and spent the remainder of his life until now, in the Lincoln area, and was a regular attendee at practice and up in the press box for almost every game that he could attend.
Yes, a true Nebraska faithful, so he'll be missed.
Yes, he was. He will be. He was a tremendous coach and obviously dedicated to the school and to Coach Osborne specifically.
Another little piece of news was our general manager, Pat Stewart. He recently did a little interview for a podcast, which I listened to. It was only like 10 minutes long, but it was nice to hear from him. I know you and I have had some criticisms of his approach from this past recruiting season and how we kind of got beat on a lot of the players we were really going after. But he did talk a bit about some of his process there, and the staff he has under him that are out looking at every, major Division I player, and keeping tabs on them, and, how many players have agents nowadays and things of that nature. So kind of an interesting conversation. But I know you had seen some commentary as well, just talking about how he kind of manages a good ship there, using his experience from the NFL in terms of having efficient and clean explanations and processes for the players that are coming into the program.
Yeah, I mean, in light of the fact that we are sitting here with a pretty solid recruiting class, certainly for Nebraska at this point, and he has fallen into some criticism, including from me and you as well, with regard to results, right? Like Nebraska fans feeling frustrated that we didn't get the guys that we needed to get. Some of the more highly regarded portal players who ended up basically going somewhere else, and the presumption often is that that was because of money, because we didn't give them what they could get from somewhere else, or there was something else that was lacking in our overall presentation. So it was interesting for me to read some insight and some commentary from people that suggests that he is getting high marks from those who he's interacting with, which was specifically, the portal players and the high school recruits and their families who come to Lincoln and are going through this new process that all teams are having to deal with now, where I mean, often a big part of a official visit now is, okay, when do I get to talk to the people who are going to tell me how much money my son's going to make? That's an important element that never existed before this whole NIL thing became a thing. So how he manages that and understanding how much money he has available for each room. How much money can he afford to give for tight ends? How many can he carry? Is it better to carry maybe one or two less tight ends, but pay the ones that you do carry more? Or do you try to sprinkle it a little thinner in the hopes that you're going to have enough volume of options that somebody's going to emerge? So there's a bunch of different philosophies out there as how you could put together a roster, knowing that you have a roster limit. I mean, he's used to the NFL where the roster limit's 47 players, right? 45 or 47 players with a few guys you can carry as practice players. Now he's dealing with a roster limit of what is it, 105, and
105,
actually
yeah.
it can be higher than that because of some grandfather clauses that are still playing into the number. So I mean, he's dealing with clearly twice as many athletes, and not all of them get paid, mind you. I understand that not everybody gets a piece of the pie, but enough do that. How you manage that, how you communicate, that's really important to not only your success in selling people on why you would want to choose Nebraska, but also just in terms of talent evaluation. Are you good at identifying players who end up being good? And you know and are you putting each room in a position where they can be successful, so that the individual coaches who used to have a lot more control, frankly, over their right, when it was about recruiting, it was about how dynamic you could be, how well you could convey and message to your players. If you're a linebacker, how well you could convey, how they were going to be utilized within your defense and all that those things were super critical. Now that's still all important, but now on top of all of that is the money component. And so, if he's not allocating enough money for your room, which I suspect most assistant coaches would believe to be true, right? They all think they deserve more money than they're getting, but that's his job to figure that all out and balance it. That's got to
Right.
be hard to do.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but not only are you hearing from the kids, about their payments or whatever, but also from the coaches. Yeah.
You bet. You bet. And they're bitching to the head coach, and it's a little different what he's doing versus a general manager of an NFL team, where a general manager is like the boss. The head coach often plays for the general manager, right? That's the hierarchy of the
Right.
structure in the NFL. Well, it's the opposite in college, right? The general manager works for the head coach,
Yep.
so it's a little different dynamic.
Right. But yeah, I think it's, like you say, it's a kind of a newer role in the world of college football, but one that's going to become increasingly important, especially if, things get even more complicated, like we were discussing with all the ways on the previous episode that the, Save College Sports Act could turn out, having to balance, even more things. I could see the headaches it could cause people.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's why that position now is so important and vital, and exists now pretty much for all the major sports programs across the United States. How well they do their job will probably be an important component of anybody's long-term success. So that general manager role is important, and again, I've been critical of him because I felt like our emphasis on defensive line has been lacking for the entire era of Matt Rule, and but it was good to hear in the interviews that he's done this spring that his priority is offensive line and defensive line. So he other than quarterback obviously, but but he understands that the places that you need to spend money is offensive line and defense. If you have a good offensive line, you can have some good running backs that are going to look really good, right? And now it's great if you can find a difference maker at running back, but you don't probably go out and spend a lot of money to go get them, right? You hope that that gets developed from within your program, and that somebody maybe overachieves, but you don't spend that money until it's proven. You know what I mean? Where
Yeah.
defensive line, I mean, that's a tough room, if you will, tough group, and you've got to have enough bodies that over the course of a season you have enough, even through the wear and tear of injuries and things of that nature, and yet you have to have enough money that you can pay some top end guys, so you have some people capable of playing Big Ten level defensive tackle. And
Right.
that's been one of my biggest, most consistent criticisms of Nebraska during the Matt Rule era, is that he inherited a couple of good players that did really well for us, but as soon as they graduated, we fell off a cliff with our interior defensive line production. And I don't think we've done a very good job of going out and refilling that with proven talent. We've got some young guys. We'll see how they do, but it's not like we're loaded with slam dunk, highly experienced NFL caliber defensive linemen at this point.
Right. Yeah. So hearing that news about the lineman must be music to your ears that he's prioritizing it.
I was pleased. I was very pleased to hear that he says that. But it's one thing to say that. It's another. The proof's in the pudding, baby.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that pudding, we got to talk a bit about the 2027 recruiting class, which we've gotten some news about here recently. Actually, since the around the end of April, we've had 12 new recruits join us for that 2027 class. And amongst those, that includes 4 4-star players, including people from a variety of different positions, including offensive line, offensive tackle, safety, tight end, defensive lineman, wide receiver. So yeah, our 2027 class, which was already shaping up to be pretty strong, is seeming like it's coming together nicely. We actually won some battles in terms of recruiting against other competition or getting players that had committed to other schools to flip to Nebraska. So that's another good sign.
Right, and we've had we haven't gotten any of them, but we've had some 5-star type talents that have come to Nebraska either on official visits or in an unofficial capacity, but still chose to come up to Lincoln and experience, a weekend event or something here or there in Lincoln, and at least give serious consideration to us. Now, whether or not those kids will ever choose Nebraska in this recruiting cycle is one thing, but the fact that we're getting enough attention and visibility and interest from guys like that, and they're not from Nebraska. I'm talking about five stars who are from like Louisiana and places like that. And that's what happens when you have a cornerstone like we were able to get with Trey Taylor. The real key of this whole thing is the fact that we now have a guy that we knew was a high end quarterback, but now because of his continued success in some of these national camps and specifically the Elite 11 competition, which he just won the MVP award as the nation's best high school entering college level quarterback in the country. Trey's a guy that you can build around. And unlike the Dylan Raiola experiment, where Dylan was a five-star for a period of time, in the recruiting process leading up to his commitment to Nebraska, but he didn't commit to Nebraska until like literally the week before signing day. So
Right.
he was not able to peer recruit, his class to Lincoln, where Trey has been committed to us since May of last year, May of 25. So he's been a commit to Nebraska for over a year. So we identified him early on, made a commitment to him, and he's committed to us. So much so that he and his family moved to Lincoln area so that he could play football and in the Omaha area, I guess, so that he would be able to be around Lincoln on game days and stuff like that, and hang out with all the recruits and the activities this summer. He would be in the area. You know what I mean? That's a
Yeah.
huge commitment on him and his family's part. So I feel fairly confident that he understands that even if this is a rough year this year, he's going to stick it out and hang with Nebraska. And I think that will help hold this class together. So he's a cornerstone if there ever was one.
Yes. Yes. Well, I remember we commented on the news of his family moving to the Nebraska area to be able to play there for his upcoming senior year at high school. That was, a above and beyond kind of sign of his commitment to the program, which was cool to see. It is kind of wild to me because I saw all that news about how he's been officially named a 5-star. He won the MVP at the Elite 11, all this great news. And yet, all this has happened and we've had him signed on to us for so long now. And he still needs to play his whole senior season, in which he could
Right.
get, either bloom even further and, win a championship or something at the high school level, or have some sort of debilitating injury and all this goes up in smoke, right? There's still so much that could happen there.
It's true, and that's always been true. I mean, that's not a new phenomenon, but you're absolutely right. Well, and here's the thing that maybe is even a little frustrating to me is that as I look at our list of recruits, we have quite a substantial number. We're at 18 now, and I know we have offers out that could easily get us into the 21, 22 range rather quickly here in the next few weeks, even certainly before fall camp starts. And yet it's not like it's loaded up with top flight wide receivers, which I would have thought that wide receivers would be clamoring to play with Trey, right? Because you want to play with on a school at a school with a quarterback who's going to be exceptional. And if you know that Trey is a great quarterback and you're a great wide receiver or one of the highly regarded wide receivers, you would think you'd want to do that. And so far that hasn't come to pass. And and again, I don't know if that has to do with money or something wrong in our messaging to wide receivers or whatever. But between defensive line and wide receivers, what I've seen from our new offensive line coach has been exceptional. I think we are moving very much in a positive direction with that, but the wide receiver recruiting has me scratching my head a little bit.
Right. Well, and I wonder, is it also maybe partially because we did get some of that with Dylan once, it became clear that he was going to be with us. We had some players transfer in, because they wanted to play with Dylan clearly. Now, will some of those guys stick around with us for the long term now that Dylan is gone? That is a bit of a question. But
Yeah.
maybe it's just that, since our wide receiver room between this year and the 2026 class is already relatively full, we just didn't have as many empty spots to, worry about for the 2027 class.
You are right on. I think that is part of the deal. That between the portal additions that we've had, as well as our young wide receiver core that was already on the roster, we didn't have a lot of room for a bunch of additional wide receivers. So that is, I think there's truth in that. But again, I'm still holding out hope that we might have one premier wide receiver that finds his way to Lincoln in some, if not a big part, being Trey Taylor, being the reason why.
Yes, I would certainly like that too. Um, and then going to what you were saying before about, how Nebraska is doing generally well in a lot of different sports, even though we haven't maybe won as many championships in some of those as we would like with women's volleyball this past season. I saw this cool stat which ranked all the major, Division One schools, college programs, based off their winning percentage in 6 sports: football, male basketball, baseball, women's volleyball, women's basketball, and softball. So you combine all 6 of those sports together, and who's the number 1 school in the country? It's Nebraska with an average win percentage of 75.7%.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a interesting but useless stat.
Right.
It certainly indicates that we had a year in which all of those teams, which you might consider some of the more weighty or significant teams on any school's athletic department roster, and to have all of them do well in the same year, right? Where all of them are on an up cycle is pretty impressive. But at the same time, I would have to concede that there weren't enough national championships out of that. In fact, there were none. And I would add some other things in there. We were actually leading the NCAA track and field meet after the first day. We had a really good showing at the track and field. And we didn't have the depth of talent to win a championship there in track and field, but we were right in the mix, right? I mean, we have some individual national champions, shot put, and some other areas on the women's side and the men's side. But bottom line, track and field did really well this year. Our wrestling team came in like second or third nationally. Um, they were in the finals and did really well. So there's a ton of our athletic department that is doing exceptionally well. So you got to give some credit to obviously the athletic director for being able to oversee all that and make sure he was answering the call when coaches need stuff. He's finding a way to make it happen. But also the fact that we've had some pretty decent continuity with our coaches too. There's not been a huge amount of turnover other than retirements of people like John Cook from the volleyball program, and our track and field teams went through a massive retirement here recently, and it's been pretty darn good. And I think it's fun. It certainly has been for me. For example, this spring to be able to enjoy watching the baseball team and the softball team compete all the way. The girls softball got all the way to the World Series, the College World Series. They didn't end up losing, but they were very competitive and had the Player of the Year. So Nebraska pitcher was the National Player of the Year for women's softball, and ironically now announced right after we got eliminated, like 2 days after we got eliminated, she announced that she was 3 months pregnant. So she
Wow.
had played her senior season in which she had an incredible ERA. She was only the second player in history to hit 20 home runs, more than 20 home runs, and have more than 20 pitching victories in the same season. She hit at an incredible level. She was probably one of the top pitchers. She's been pitcher of the year in previous years. She's the best pitcher if you looked at overall her career. But this year, I think there was maybe another player or two who had better statistics on the pitching side. But she just was absolutely remarkable, and she was doing all that while pregnant. And the first trimester of a pregnancy can often, especially the first child, can involve a lot of morning sickness and just not feeling very good, right? And so to be able to compete like she did, being pregnant, is just another impressive mental toughness stat to add to her amazing resume. And now she has immediately become, she was just named an assistant coach at Nebraska. So because she's pregnant, she's not going to be playing professional softball in the near term, right? And so
Right.
she's decided that, well, I can have a baby and be a coach. So she's gonna stay on the staff as an assistant coach for the softball program.
Very cool. I hadn't heard that story.
Mm-hmm.
And just to mention as well, I know the girls' softball team won the Big Ten tournament uh,
Yes.
this year. That was amongst just that conference. And for the men's side, we did well. We were 23-7 in conference play, and then made it to the semifinals in the tournament, but lost to Oregon. So
Right. But we won the regular season, so we were the regular season Big Ten champs in both sports, and then won the tournament in the softball and ended up losing in the semifinal of the baseball tournament. So
yep,
very, very impressive by both teams.
yeah. And then I know there were a few updates in the world of women's volleyball that you wanted to comment on as well.
Yeah, well, actually, we're recording this on uh, June 14th, and so it's 10:30 by my clock here on the Eastern Time Zone, and so in an hour and a half, they can officially start to reach out and call student athletes. And so, depending on, oftentimes they will have sent some communication to a student athlete to indicate that they want to call them and arrange a time and that sort of stuff. But some players will actually receive calls maybe as early as 12:01 a.m. With to extend an offer to them. Depending on the gamesmanship and how they want to handle a particular athlete. But so there's going to be a lot of information starting to flow now. Historically in recent years, a lot of the girls have made decisions rather quickly, and so you've gotten commitments rather quickly after this June 15th date. I think that's going to be less so this year. But one of the driving factors for that is, oftentimes until this new roster size adjustment that just recently happened, 2 years ago, um, the number of scholarships that a school could offer was 12. Well, now the roster's 18, and all 18 can be on scholarship if they want to be, right? They could be
Right.
fully funded at 18 scholarships. So that gives the student athletes a few more scholarships to choose from. And so, but there used to be more exclusivity, more scarcity in the scholarships. So players would feel compelled to commit right away. Otherwise they're going to lose their spot, right? Because schools may have only had, two, maybe three scholarships to offer. And so if you really wanted to go to a school X, but you weren't absolutely sure, you'd like to maybe consider school Y and Z, well, if you do that and your first choice was likely going to be X, but you sure would like to hear from Y and Z, if you do that, X might be full, right?
Right.
And so there was kind of a domino effect that would happen, and it would happen pretty quick. I think that's going to be less so starting this year. I think you're going to see those student athletes probably have a little more comfort in, taking their time with their decision. We'll see. There might still be some quick triggers, but I'm expecting Nebraska will end up with a pretty darn good recruiting class that will keep them in the hunt. But there's some other dynamics going on in the sport of volleyball that frighten me a little bit. One of our competitors in the sport, Wisconsin, one of the premier Big Ten competitors to Nebraska, you know, uh, they have put together a number one. They'll have the number one recruiting class for this year, 2026, and it just got better because they just had a student athlete move up from 2027 to starting in 2026, and she's from Puerto Rico and has been playing on the national team there. She actually has been playing on an Italian professional team for a couple of years. She's only 17, mind you, but she's incredible. She's 6'6", and it's very possible that Wisconsin will have at least four and maybe even five regular rotation international players playing on their team. All of them having played to some degree professional volleyball before they got to Wisconsin. So, this idea of being international invasion, particularly in the sport of volleyball, which is bigger in a lot of these other countries than it is here, in terms of how it's treated. Those girls tend to be way ahead of our girls because they don't have any limits or restrictions on the number of hours they can play the sport. They play it year round. So their skills are just more developed. And it's scary to me what that means to a lot of these Olympic sports, where that is truly the case in a lot of those, and how many of those scholarships are going to ultimately end up in the hands of international players rather than Americans.
Right.
I have my eye on that.
Well, hearing that she's 6'6" is certainly on brand for Wisconsin's coach. I'll say that.
Mhm.
But I was recalling reading about the 5-year eligibility rule that has been considered for the NCAA that we discussed on the last podcast. And I believe there was mentioned that they are not, as part of this, they are not restricting the ability to recruit international or former pro athletes to college sports, but there is the age limit. So at least you can't go get, a 24-year-old or 25-year-old, to come be on your college team. But as long as they're young, like this girl sounds like she is, fair game.
Yep, exactly right. Exactly right. And so, yep, yeah. So it's just interesting to see that dynamic. So now Wisconsin now moves into, frankly, if not the number one team, they're going to be right there with Nebraska for the number one team in the Big Ten, and frankly, probably in the top three nationally, along with us and Texas and some of the typical names you might expect. But but that changes the whole dynamic for Wisconsin, which kind of would have had a gap in their team for not in their team, but in their roster, where they would have to have somebody really emerge for them to truly be, strong in every spot. Now with her addition, they don't have a weakness.
Right.
So
And how exactly does that work where she was committed to next year's class, but then did she graduate early and that's why she's able to come in?
apparently, she was able to prove to meet the standards for the academics. And this is interesting since she's Puerto Rican, so English is going to be her second language. So she must be a pretty sharp gal if she is able to get into the University of Wisconsin admissions process, right? While being from a foreign country and coming in as a freshman, while also having played in Italy last year in the A2 league. So I think she must know a little Italian too. She must be a remarkable girl.
I guess so. All
Seriously.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we'll have to see when we'll be playing Wisconsin as we do every year, of course. So we'll have to see how she's doing and if she's going to become the next terror that we're going to have to deal with for the next 4 or 5 years on the volleyball
Right.
court.
Right. I think she is going to be that for sure, unless she gets hurt or something. But yeah, no, she's going to be the real deal. But it's just it's just a kind of a scary trend, and Wisconsin's leading the way a little bit in it, of filling their roster with international players who've had a lot of professional experience. And
Right.
I mean, right now it's within the rules, but it just smacks of not being in the spirit of the tradition of collegiate sports, right?
Yes.
And it's ultimately taking scholarships away from American volleyball players.
Right. But to assuage some Nebraska fans out there who might be worried after we went on Wisconsin for so long, I know that a lot of our younger girls, who certainly had the opportunity to transfer to
Yep.
other schools for playing time, chose to stick around with Nebraska despite the, disappointing loss in the tournament this year. Obviously, we've got a ton of great young talent that's only going to continue to develop further. We've got DBK here to lead things forward after a great start to her coaching career at Nebraska. So still a lot of positivity coming in there.
Yeah, and I'm not saying we haven't recruited international players, because we have, and one of our starters, Adriano, um,
Right.
is is also, she's from Italy, and was a professional, okay, before she came over. So it's not like we're not participating in that. So I'm speaking about that trend as a national problem, not a Wisconsin problem. Although Wisconsin is the poster child for it, because they're the ones utilizing it way more than others. And this particular gal, her last name is Champion, and Desalise is her first name, Desalise Champion. She's a phenomenal player, and as I said, it seems like must be an amazing young woman, given what she's done with her academics and just her life choice and her maturity to be able to do what she's done. But it's just a little scary to think about what might be coming in the future for all these traditional Olympic sports.
Right. Yep. Well, that's a trend we'll certainly keep an eye on as we monitor all things in the world of college sports going forward here on College Football Throwdown. And we hope you out there enjoyed listening to this episode. A little bit of a shorter one, just going over some of the Nebraska details. Obviously, we're in kind of the quiet months of summer here, but before long, we'll be getting into fall practice and really properly gearing up for the football season.
Yes, yes, it's going to be here before we know it.
So we hope you out there enjoyed listening to this episode. You can email us at collegefootballthrowdown@gmail.com. You can also follow us if you search for College Football Throwdown on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or YouTube. You can leave us a rating or review there. We always love hearing feedback from the fans. So thank you out there for listening, and thank you, Dad, for joining me for this episode. And until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.